The boundaries which divide life from death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins? This is a story about a moment frozen outside of time and space, a meeting at the crossroads with the devil itself, and a deal that would decide the fates of countless lives for generations to come. The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe is a tale about legacy and consequence. It recounts the last days of Roderick Usher, the last in the line of the once great Usher family, a rather unremarkable family who accomplished great wealth through inheritance and questionable means, but created nothing of value. We witness Roderick's fall into insanity through the eyes of the character known only as the narrator, Roderick's childhood friend. As to why Roderick is going mad is anyone's guess. Poe is incredibly ambiguous in his stories and forces the reader to come to their own conclusions. But my favorite interpretation is that Roderick is being driven mad by the legacy of evil that his family left behind. A key aspect to the story is Roderick's twin sister Madeline, who is also going mad, or at least we think so. Her role, again, is incredibly vague and ambiguous in the story. But Roderick is convinced that she is going to die any day, and that he will follow soon after. One day, sure enough, Roderick announces Madeline's death and asks the narrator to help him entomb her in the family vault, which also used to be a torture dungeon, a hint that the Ushers weren't the best of people. In the days following, the narrator notices his own nerves begin to fray as he starts hearing strange things. It all climaxes on one stormy night where the narrator tries to calm them both down with a story, but as he reads, they begin hearing the events of the book playing out somewhere beneath them. Then they hear someone wailing and coming down the hall. The storm intensifies and begins shaking the manor. Roderick knows very well who's coming, for he believes that he entombed his sister alive. Then, sure enough, Madeline bursts through the door, seizes Roderick, and the two fall down dead. The narrator narrowly escapes the house and watches it get swallowed up by an eerie red light, then disappear into the earth, never to be seen again. Mike Flanagan's version gives us a fully fleshed out interpretation, adding new color and life to the classic Gothic horror. Not only does he give new life to the Fall of the House of Usher, but he does so with several other classic tales from Poe's arsenal, each one pertaining to a character from the series. And he overlays these fictional characters on top of the notoriously evil real-life Sackler family, who are the reason we have an opioid crisis in the first place. This House of Usher consists of the patriarch Roderick Usher, who is the CEO of Fortunato Pharmaceuticals, Madeline Usher, his twin sister, who is the COO, and all of Roderick's children, 6 of them from 4 different mothers. No judgment. Listed in order, we have Frederick and Tamarlane, the OG Usher children, then Victorine, Napoleon, Camille, and Prospero.
Did you know that Tammy and Frederick call us the bastards?
As well as a host of secondary characters. The first time we get to see them all interact is in this beautiful dinner scene. The music playing is the Allegretto in Beethoven's 7th Symphony, a piece written as a war cry against the Soviets during the Napoleonic Wars. I think it's used here to symbolize the family about to go to war with itself, for there is an informant in their midst, and Roderick offers to pay $50 million to the person who finds them. We have a family at war with itself. Now, we are about to enter into spoiler territory, so I encourage you to click off if you don't want me to reveal anything. The rest of the video will be one great big spoiler.
I appreciate your concern, but I'm not about to turn back now.
So now that they're gone, let's begin, shall we?
It's time.
Roderick's children begin dying under strange circumstances. At first, he believes that someone is after his family so as to crush their business empire. But he then slowly begins to remember one fateful night he tried to forget that changed his and Madeline's lives forever. Towards the end of the series, we learn that Roderick and Madeline sadistically murdered Roderick's boss on New Year's Eve 1979, after which they entered a bar to establish an alibi. The bartender was a mysterious woman named Verna, who seemed to have an unworldly knowledge of their affairs.
You're a killer, aren't you? Both of you. Couple real killers.
We can tell right away that she is not what she seems to be, but intrigues nonetheless. She offers a deal of power and money to the two with no risk of ever being found guilty in a court of law.
What if I told you right now that you could achieve all the success you ever imagined? What if I said I could guarantee that you'll get away with it?
Essentially, a free pass to do anything with no consequence. The catch?
You get the whole world, and when you're done, your bloodline dies with you.
Roderick would get to live to a ripe old age and then die the way he would have anyway. But when he does expire, every single person carrying Usher blood would die with him, including Madeline. In a moment that would echo through the globe, he and his sister agree to the terms. Now keep in mind, Roderick already has 2 children at this point. We see a monster revealed. A monster that lies at the very core of each and every one of us, mind you. A monster that wants, and a stranger who can provide for a price. When Roderick's debts come due, he is forced to watch the consequence of his choice unfold before his horrified eyes. He must witness in excruciating agony the deaths of each one of his children, and tragically, his innocent granddaughter Lenore. For Lenore, and to a lesser extent Morel, are the only ones we truly feel sorry for. The others seem to earn their fate all on their own. They all may be innocent victims of their father and aunt's selfish desires, but they each accepted a level of evil into their own souls which determined their fates. Verna even implies that they had a choice in how they died.
I could have done this just about any way I wanted to. You could have had a heart attack in your car. The Coke would have teed that up nicely.
But then you had to bring her home. And you had to grab the pliers.
But they chose the dark path lined with bricks of greed, lust, sloth, wrath, vanity, and pride. All of the things that the devil delights in most. These violent delights have violent ends. This series is a character study focusing on greed, legacy, power, and what any of it means in the end. And the best part is that it's all told through the lens of one of the greatest tellers of horror that has ever lived. Now, in order to try and do each literary reference justice, I have decided to break each section down into characters and explore the themes from there. Not all of the characters, mind you, but the main ones. Afterwards, we will bring it all together and view this latest Mike Flanagan masterpiece as a whole to see what the fall of the House of Usher really means.
It's time.
And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel and died, each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the flames of the tripods expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all.
Prince Prospero is the main character in The Masque of the Red Death, published in 1842. A tale about a lavish prince who thought he could hide from the plague by holding up in his palace with a bunch of his courtiers. They passed the time and ignored the death around them by throwing balls and engaging in debauchery. However, no one can hide from death, not even the wealthiest of princes. And Prince Prospero and all of his courtiers are reminded of that during the last masked ball they would ever attend.
Why should you be afraid to die? Your soul has been dead for a long time.
The Prospero in the series goes by Perry, which I will call him from now on. But he is in every way Prince Prospero, reincarnated. He has little regard for others, is obsessed with image and vanity, thinks the rules don't apply to him, and meets his untimely end, engaging in the debaucherously lustful excess that corroded his soul and sealed his fate. Like all of Roderick's children, Perry desperately wishes to make his father proud. This desperation consumes him and leads him down a path which would be his undoing. Due to his vanity, he naively thinks that his idea for an ultra-exclusive nightclub will be a slam-dunk business idea. When Roderick and Madeline disagree and knock him down a couple of pegs, he decides to take matters into his own hands. Leading up to it, we can see all the warning signs. He chooses a condemned building in which to throw his exclusive party, doesn't have anything checked for safety, ties into a line that he assumes leads to fresh water, but doesn't. Oh yeah, and invites his sister-in-law to his orgy. To top it all off, we learn that Perry was recording everyone at the club to use as blackmail later on. A real chip off the old block. But even after all of that, he is still given a chance to turn it all around. Verna appears, offering him a way out.
And there's still time.
To what?
To stop it.
But Perry refuses and makes his choice. And that is why the Masque of the Red Death is such a satisfying tale of terror. For not even those who are shielded by wealth, power, and grandiose excess can escape the clutches of fate. And when she arrives, there is nothing you can offer her but the only thing she's come to claim: your life. Perry's tale in the series is a tragic one, even though he did make his own choices. He was always a misfit in the family and felt excluded from the others for it. In a family where he couldn't find his place, he found a way to fill the loneliness with lust. But that is the warning to those who will heed the lesson. True satisfaction and meaning have nothing to do with carnal pleasures. Connection is what is craved. But Perry never found that connection because he kept looking in the darkness for it. And eventually, with no one to pull him back, he finally gave in, and it swallowed him whole. In investigations such as we are now pursuing, it should not be so much asked what has occurred as what has occurred that has never occurred before. The Murders in the Rue Morgue might just be one of the very first detective stories ever written. It too is told by an unnamed narrator who befriends a man named Auguste Dupin, and the two set about trying to solve a couple of ghastly murders in the Rue Morgue apartment building. There is not an actual morgue in the story. I know, I was disappointed too. Camille L'Espagne and her mother were brutally murdered, and the police are at a loss for how it was done. Enter our trusty detective who, through a calm head and an analytical mind, is able to deduce that the orangutan did it. Yep. Yeah, it's an odd story, but it's still fun to follow along with Dupin's curious mind to get to the conclusion, however odd it may be. Obviously, the story in the series doesn't follow the original one too closely. Instead, we get Camille as a feature character, reimagined as a spin doctor of the seediest kind. When she learns of her father's offer to pay $50 million to anyone who finds the informant,
we really should get together more often. It's just a balm for the soul.
She sets to work trying to find any dirt she can on her half-sister Victorine, who she absolutely despises for some reason. It's probably because the two are so competitive. Victorine runs the lab Rue Clinical Research, where she is trying to come up with a mechanical heart replacement that will revolutionize the healthcare industry, and which, side note, is Roderick's last chance to delay his imminent death from vascular dementia. Camille sneaks into the lab one night and encounters Verna, disguised as a night guard. Like with Perry, she offers her a way out, a chance to turn back.
But you shouldn't be here, and you don't have to be here. That's all I was saying.
But Camille is not the type to back down.
Open the door.
And so she proceeds forward to her fate. She finds the dirt she needs, but Verna shows up, acting odd. In her final moment, Camille takes one last photo of her murderer, and wouldn't you know it, the chimp did it. Camille's life was picture perfect, by design. She crafted the family's legacy through carefully worded spin, with a mind sharper than a shark's tooth. She was an illusionist, so good at what she did she had no idea who the true version of herself was. No identity, no grounding, only spin.
I'd just spin. Dad decided that I belong in a room of smoke and mirrors, and I'm like a ceiling fan, and I spin and I spin and I spin and I don't go anywhere. Ushers don't make stuff. None of us.
We can see a hint of Perry in her attitude towards sex, no doubt. She too seemingly has no ability to connect with anyone beyond the physical sexual act, and she hires people to take care of that for her. She is another tragic example of a person who was never emotionally fed, only prodded forward towards some illusory legacy of familial achievement, which only served to add to their agony. She was trapped in the idea of perfection, much like the sister she hated, desperate for approval by any means necessary from the one person who deliberately withheld it. In the end, her mask was torn off. The life ended in a moment of physical brutality, which mirrored her own verbal brutality towards others.
You're gonna do the smart thing and go back to your crossword puzzle, or else I'll have you fired and sued. What's a 6-letter word for—
But her words couldn't save her when her time came, and she knew that. She didn't fight or scream, possibly because there was so little of herself left to even care anymore.
Fuck it.
Whatever the cause, in that moment,
You got mine.
the realization of her fate, she stoically accepted it, however odd it may be.
One night, returning home much intoxicated, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket.
The Black Cat is a tale published in 1843 about a man whose alcoholic anger would be his ultimate undoing. You see, this man had a bad temper, and when combined with alcohol, it would flare up for seemingly no reason at times. He took it out on his animals, going too far one day and killing his cat Pluto. He felt bad, of course, and when a new black cat entered his home one day, he promised it would be different. But one day, he almost trips on the new cat and in a blind rage grabs an axe and makes to hit the cat. But his wife grabbed a hold of his arm. Bad idea, because he turned around and kills her instead. Then he decides to wall her up in the house so that no one will ever find her. He is confident he won't be caught and even has people over. But the ding-dong didn't realize he walled the cat up with his wife. And the little thing's meows prompt the people to tear down the wall and find his beloved missing wife, with the cat sitting atop her head. Now we can definitely see that drunken anger in Napoleon, or Leo Usher, who is drawn from a character in Poe's 1844 story, The Spectacles, which doesn't seem to pertain to the series so much, so I'm leaving a summary out, but I will link it if you'd like to read it. Though probably the most redeemable of the bunch, Leo numbs himself with an extraordinary amount of drugs to suppress his demons, probably having to do with his father, like his other siblings. All of that pent-up rage comes out when he wakes one morning to discover he has killed their cat Pluto in a drunken blackout. Or at least, he believes he has. He cleans everything up and sets off to find a cat replacement so that his boyfriend Julian is none the wiser. Lo and behold, he stumbles across Verna working in an animal shelter where a perfect Pluto replacement is found. She warns him that the cat is not available and that he should choose another.
Not available. That's a purebred British Shorthair. We've already had 4 applications for her online.
But Leo insists and offers to donate as much money as he needs to take that cat home. He succeeds, of course, as money usually does, but the cat, just like Pluto, does not like him and begins terrorizing him. No one else but Leo can see the cat, making it all the more mysterious and leading us to believe that Leo might be seeing things. Finally, in a night of complete madness, he tears his apartment apart looking for the cat so as to end its life in the most brutal fashion. He calls Verna, but she just complicates things. Julian comes home just in time to see Leo fling himself off the balcony, in an act of fuming rage towards the visions in his head, as we learn that that's all they were. Visions that drove him mad. This might actually be a good time to talk about Roderick's diagnosis of vascular dementia.
It's a hereditary form of vascular cognitive impairment. Before it kills you, it causes symptoms very much like dementia.
It's like slowly going mad. One of the consequences can be hallucinations, so there is a case to be made that the ushers are all seeing things caused by this dementia. However, I think we can throw that idea out the window since they all have interactions with Verna. It's not likely that they're all hallucinating the same woman. Plus, Arthur Pym sees Verna too, and he's not an usher. Anyway, I just felt like I needed to add this little bit of information before we proceed. So it's done now. Back to Leo. Leo's means of numbing his emotions lies in excessive drug consumption and, as with the first 2, superficial sex. After learning of his deceased siblings, his habits only grow worse, understandably. But now his anger is reaching uncontrollable levels, and anger is destructive. The cat serves as a mirror to that anger, I think. It reflects Leo's inner hostility by attacking only him in increasingly brutal fashion. And Leo can never catch the cat to hurt or kill it, which is an excellent example for how you can never destroy your anger. You must find a way to calm it or else it will consume you. There is no fighting it away. But Leo loses that battle and becomes his own undoing. Destroyed by his anger, another usher falls. You fancy me mad? Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. In The Telltale Heart, an unnamed narrator opens the story by addressing the reader and claiming that he is nervous, but not mad. He says that he is going to tell a story in which he will defend his sanity, yet confess to having killed an old man. His motivation was neither passion nor desire for money, but rather a fear of the old man's pale blue eye. Every night, he went to the old man's apartment and secretly observed him sleeping. In the morning, he would behave as if nothing were out of the normal. After a week of this activity, the narrator decides somewhat randomly that the time is right to actually kill the old man. When the narrator arrives late on the 8th night, the old man wakes up and cries out. The narrator remains still, stalking the old man as he sits awake and frightened. Soon the narrator hears a dull pounding that he interprets as the old man's terrified heartbeat. Worried that a neighbor might hear the loud thumping, he attacks and kills the old man. Then he dismembers the body and hides the pieces below the floorboards in the bedroom. He is careful not to leave even a drop of blood on the floor. At the same time, the narrator hears a knock at the street door. The police have arrived, having been called by a neighbor who heard the old man shriek. The narrator is careful to be chatty and appear normal. He leads the officers all over the house without acting suspiciously. At the height of his bravado, he even brings them into the old man's bedroom to sit down and talk at the scene of the crime. The policemen do not suspect a thing. The narrator is comfortable until he starts to hear a low thumping sound. He recognizes the low sound as the heart of the old man, pounding away beneath the floorboards. He panics, believing that the policemen must also hear the sound and know his guilt. Driven mad by the idea that they are mocking his agony with their pleasant chatter, he confesses to the crime and shrieks at the men to rip up the floorboards.
It is the beating of his hideous heart.
And if we're going to succeed, we just need a better heart.
This tale of guilt, paranoia, and mental deterioration is told beautifully through the story of Victorine Usher, whose namesake is from a tale called The Premature Burial. As so often with Edgar Allan Poe stories, the premature burial is told by an unnamed narrator, who, he tells us, has been suffering with catalepsy, which means he sometimes appears to be, to all intents and purposes, dead, when in fact he is in the grip of a cataleptic seizure. He tells us about people who have been buried while still alive only to be subsequently rescued. The most significant case for the narrator, though, and the one he recounts in the most detail, is that of a wealthy and beautiful young French woman, Victorine Lefoucauld, who married a banker even though her heart lay with a young journalist named Julien. Victorine in this series is a fame-hungry scientist/investor who is working on a cutting-edge heart replacement that will revolutionize the health industry. For her, failure is not an option, and she is willing to compromise research if it gets her results. Elizabeth Holmes, anyone? Her greatest fear is being a failure in her father's eyes, and she is willing to stoop to any level in order to avoid that. So when Verna shows up presenting the perfect heart to begin illegal human trials on, she jumps at the opportunity with no hesitation. The work is what matters most, not the vulnerable human desperate for life. However, her girlfriend/surgeon isn't having any of it and dips out. Or tries to. Victorine is presented with an opportunity to help Dr. Ruiz, but she avoids it entirely. This is where she starts to go mad as the sound of a mechanical ticking won't leave her alone, a symbol of her guilt. Later on, Roderick shows up wanting an update on that heart research and notices Victorine acting a bit odd. He hears the ticking too, though. It leads him into Victorine's room of horror and realizes that his daughter has succumbed to madness because of the pressure he put on her to succeed. She then ends herself right in front of him. Roderick's expectations on his children consumed their souls. It seems only right that he should have to see the agony he caused. But Verna isn't done with him just yet. See by this image, which is thine own, how utterly thou hast murdered thyself. Tamerlane is a melancholy poem narrated by the ruler Timur as he unburdens himself at the end of his life to a priest. Timur recounts his happy childhood and the love he enjoyed then, and expresses regret that he traded that love for the ambition that took him far from home and made him a great ruler. Tamerlane Usher is the female version of this character. She is ambitious, cutthroat, and completely emotionally stunted. This character can also be seen in William Legrand, who features in 1843's The Gold Bug. In summary, the story is about a man who becomes obsessed with the idea that a golden-colored beetle he found is some sort of a pirate key that will unlock a great treasure. He is willing to sacrifice those around him in order to find that treasure, which he ultimately finds. It's not my favorite Poe story, but many like it for its detective-like aspects. As always, I'll link it if you want to read it. From the moment we are introduced to Tammy, we are presented with a force to be reckoned with. The music that plays at the start and end of her story is Beethoven's Piano Sonata 17, also known as The Tempest. And that is what Tammy is, a storm willing to swallow up anything and everything that stands in her way, even the man who loves her most. Tammy is a deeply broken woman who bucks at the slightest hint of emotional vulnerability, another consequence of her father's cruel and brutal child-rearing tactics nonetheless. She has a kink for watching prostitutes LARP with her husband Bill, who is based on William Wilson from Poe's 1839 story about a man whose doppelganger followed him around, driving him mad and ultimately causing him to kill himself. In fact, the story of William Wilson is more relevant to Tammy's tale than the gold bug, but that's what's great about this section. It infuses so many tales within to add more layers of discovery. Tammy doesn't know who she is outside of the Usher legacy. She has forced herself to be someone she isn't for so long that she can't even recognize her own reflection. She chooses to watch her husband have relations with a woman pretending to be her, rather than make love to him herself. So when that version of her begins to take over her life, she doesn't know what else to do, but what she has always done: fight. But Verna doesn't want to fight. She wants to show Tammy what she has been avoiding. She wants to show her who she truly is.
It's your last chance to be perfectly still and breathe before the inevitable.
But Tammy knows deep down that her soul is so corroded that her true reflection would be too painful to look at. She knows that who she has allowed herself to become is monstrous. Her pride refused to bow to humility, and so she meets her end, battling herself to the very last moment. And you know what? She finally won. Long suffering had nearly annihilated all my ordinary powers of mind. I was an imbecile, an idiot. An idiot is exactly what Frederick Usher is, but a calculating idiot nonetheless. An idiot that is underestimated due to his seemingly stunted state of mental development. No one suspects that someone like Freddy could be capable of the most grotesque imaginings, which is why, to me, he is the most terrifying Usher. His namesake is based on a story called Metzengerstein, wherein a youth named Frederick becomes enamored with a wild horse that makes him feel powerful, but terrifies everyone else. There's also a feud going on with another family wherein Frederick is suspected of starting a fire that killed someone. In the end, Frederick's own house catches fire, and his wild horse carries him into the flames to die. A fitting end for an arsonist, if I say so myself. The story that the Freddy in the series is placed into is called The Pit and the Pendulum, published in 1842. It's about a man who awakens in a torture tomb built by the Spanish Inquisition. They play mind games with him, like swinging a huge scythe from the ceiling to see if he could escape. Then they push the walls in to see if he'll fall into the pit of doom. But luckily, he is saved at the last minute when invading forces overpower the Spanish Inquisition. Freddy wasn't so lucky. And thank goodness, because that ding-dong deserved what he got. After finding out that his wife was keeping a big naughty secret from him, he proceeds to torture her in the most sadistic way possible. Freddy's desperation to live up to his father's expectations and to be the perfect son was bound to crack at the slightest storm. He too fears his father's displeasure and would do anything to avoid it. The incredible pressure that put on his back, combined with the possibility of his wife's infidelity with his younger brother, is what led Freddy to seek relief in the White Stuff. But now his monsters would be released, and because he is a weak individual, he takes his rage out on the person who cannot fight back. But, luckily, all works out well in the end, and Freddy gets to watch his destruction, wide-eyed and aware of every agonizing swing of the scythe. My whole soul was pervaded with a longing to fall.
How much do you know about Arthur Pym?
While not an usher, I want to quickly talk about Arthur Pym, the usher's lead attorney whose particularly nasty contracts are deemed masterpieces by the family, and has been cleaning up their messes for ages. He's named for the protagonist of the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, Poe's only published novel. Released in 1838 and inspired by a newspaper article, it follows the seafaring tale of a whaling ship called the Grampus.
You should name it the Grampus.
Upon which a New England boy called Pym stows away. But the ship steers into truly doomed territory in multiple ways. It's a fitting string of awful circumstances suffered by the namesake for Hamill's character, who has seen and covered up some real dirt within the Usher family. A doomed sinking ship in itself. Arthur's only loyalty is to the Ushers. He has no family, no friends, no life outside of his work. He deliberately avoids vulnerability by never becoming attached to anyone. A life of suspended morality in exchange for the illusion of protection. For when the Ushers fall, there is no one left to protect him, and he is finally, truly, alone. But he does not take Verna's deal. He could escape everything that he has coming to him, but he chooses not to.
So you can either ride the phoenix out of Fortunato's ashes, or you can watch it fly away from a federal prison cell.
Thank you for your consideration and for your generous offer. But I think I'll play out my hand.
He chooses to pay his dues before death and spend the rest of his life in prison. I'm willing to bet that when the Reaper finally comes for him, she might be a little less punishing than she was with the Ushers. Arthur Pym serves as a reminder that it's never too late to pay for our sins, and the act, very well, may be liberating.
See, on yon drear and rigid bier low lies thy love, Lenore. Come, let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung. An anthem for the queenliest dead that ever died so young. A dirge for her, the doubly dead in that she died so young.
Poe's 1831 poem Lenore is a mournful lament that revolves around the death of a young woman named Lenore. The poem is set in a mournful atmosphere where a group of Knights Plutonian shore angels discuss Lenore's untimely death. 𝙇𝙄𝙆𝙀𝘎, Lenore's fiancé, mourns her passing but is rebuked by others, who say she now rests in heaven. 𝙇𝙄𝙆𝙀𝑎argues argues that Lenore is better off in the afterlife, free from the pains and troubles of the living. He condemns the mourners for not understanding that death might be a release from suffering. The poem emphasizes the idea that the dead may be more fortunate than the living. Throughout the poem, Poe explores themes of death, the afterlife, and the grief experienced by those left behind. In Flanagan's series, Lenore is the innocent victim who must be claimed by the curse of the Ushers. She has led a life of integrity and virtue, but still must pay the price of her lineage. This is the part that led me to view Verna differently. She knows she is taking an innocent, but finds no pleasure in it. She seems to be a spirit of justice, and she knows that this act is unjust, but it must happen nonetheless. And so she does it quickly, with no games. Both The Raven and Lenore are about an innocent who died too young. Both narrators wail in agony at the realization of this loss, and we see that representation when Roderick discovers his granddaughter. This might be the most human we see him in the whole series, the only time when we might feel his pain, because this loss cuts the sharpest. He knows how undeserving Lenore was of her fate, and he is entirely to blame for her death. All because of a deal struck so long ago with a stranger offering miracles born through sin. A deal so good that what little humanity was left in the Roderick twins evaporated instantly with no regret, but her, holding his innocent, lifeless granddaughter. All that was left of whatever good remained in the Usher blood was ended because of him. And because of her, and because of their insatiable need for power. And now look at them. Their time is just about up. Not hear it? Yes, I hear it, and have heard it. Long, many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it. Yet, I dare not. Oh, pity me, miserable wretch that I am. I dare not speak. We have put her living in the tomb. Roderick and Madeline's legacy is Fortunato Pharmaceuticals. It isn't their blood. It isn't their money. This is their legacy. Fortunato is also a character in Poe's tale, The Cask of Amontillado. Fortunato meets his untimely end when he is walled up alive in a wine cellar by a man named Montresor who believes that Fortunato slighted him somehow. The echo from this story is of course found on that fateful night when Roderick and Madeline's lives changed forever. The night they became merciless killers. Before that, Roderick had already demonstrated how low he was willing to descend when he betrayed his wife Annabelle Lee's trust by turning on an ally, Dupin, who was trying to expose the cover-ups happening at Fortunato. But Roderick, encouraged by Madeline, chose a different path and betrayed Dupin and Annabelle Lee, which cost him the love of his life. Poe's poem titled simply Annabelle Lee is a beautiful yet tragic lament to the narrator's lost beloved. It tells of young lovers forced apart to never meet again as the beautiful Annabelle Lee dies shortly after. The narrator, overcome with grief, wails out in agony to the heavens, for he knows that her ghost will be with him, at his side, for the rest of his days.
Our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who are older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabelle Lee.
Once Roderick sacrificed his only love's trust, he lost the reason to seek virtue and succumbed fully to greed. But she is the one thing that he regretted losing. He could have had a life of penniless peace with her, writing poetry and raising their children. But he wanted power and money, and Madeline would make sure he wanted it more than anything else. Which brings us back to the beginning. A moment held in time. A moment that would decide the fates of countless individuals across the globe. The worst part is that they wouldn't even see it coming. Two people given a life which they knew fed off the roots from the depths of hell. To sacrifice your children for selfish gain is probably one of the worst things you can do. But to sacrifice millions of strangers for profit is a new evil entirely. The way they chose to rise through the rankings of Fortunato by the cruel murder of the admittedly horrible Rufus Griswold is what opened the door for the devil to walk through and offer a deal that they couldn't refuse. After all, they already had blood on their hands. What's a bit more? I think it's also important to note that Roderick knew his bloodline would perish with him, and still went on to have unprotected relations with countless women, resulting in at least 4 children that we know about. I think there's real evil in that. If anything, Roderick and Madeline embody what it means to truly turn yourself over to evil. I saw no spark of regret, no empathy or compassion beyond the grief felt for Lenore. They mostly felt indignified that the world didn't love them more and appreciate the gift they gave. Their end is poetic in that they die as they came into this world, together, locked in a moment of terror as their last breaths leave them, and they are left with nothing but decay. And this is why the House of Usher must fall. For when death calls, no amount of money or influence will get you out of it. And you will finally have to see everything you've been avoiding your whole life. Because in the end, it's just you and it. And you won't be able to look away when it comes.
It's time.
And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor.
And my soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, shall be lifted nevermore.
Death wears many faces, but in the end, its true reflection will be seen, and when you gaze into the eyes of death, all you will see is self, the lifetime of choices that led you to who you are at the moment your heart stops beating. The raven will be there to show you the ripple effect of those choices, and the ultimate judge of your actions will not be God or the devil. It will be you. You will feel all of your choices, and you will know your impact, for good or for bad. The raven is a symbol or omen for death and judgment in many cultures. Poe employed this symbolism beautifully in his magnum opus 1845 poem, The Raven. In the poem, we meet a man in isolation trying to distract himself from his sorrows over his dearly departed Lenore. He begins hearing things and his anxiety starts to overwhelm him. As he is investigating a noise outside, a raven flits into his room and sits above the door, just out of reach. The bird is of an otherworldly nature and the man knows it. This is no ordinary bird. The raven says nothing but nevermore in reply to the man's questions. At first he finds it amusing. Then he feels a darkness spread through him when he thinks of Lenore. He asks if the pain he feels will ever go away. Quoth the raven, nevermore. As with all art, interpretation is subjective, but I don't think the raven is evil. I think it serves as a mirror to what we already know in our souls to be true, but we try to hide from that truth, and so, when the raven shows up, we can no longer look away and distract ourselves. We must see. We must feel. I think VERNA is the symbolic raven that reflects our inner nature so that we can take a good, hard look at who we have become and where we are headed. She provides opportunities which can lead us closer to wholeness or further away towards inner division and turmoil. The choice is always ours, but all choices have consequences, and the raven won't let us hide from them. In the end, she equalizes, balances the scales, and ensures that all debts owed are paid in full, and everything that one puts into the world comes back in due course. We all get out of this life what we put in, and the House of Usher got exactly what it gave. And so it had to fall, and with it, the legacy of greed, lust, sloth, wrath, vanity, and pride came crumbling to the ground, never to be seen again.
Lo, death has reared himself a throne in a strange city, lying alone, far down within the dim west where the good and the bad and the worst and the best have gone to their eternal rest.
The City in the Sea describes a dreamlike, decaying city that lies beneath a lurid sea where no waves roll. This eerie, silent city is ruled by death and is filled with grand, Gothic structures, including towers and shrines. The waters are calm, and the city seems frozen in time, untouched by any life or movement. As the poem progresses, it is suggested that the city's sinking is inevitable. At the end, hellish flames rise, causing the waters to resonate, and the entire city begins to sink deeper, pulled down by the shadows of the infernal realm below. The poem delves into themes of death, decay, and the inexorable passage of time, capturing a sense of inevitable doom, a fitting allegory for the House of Usher, a great city built on decaying ground in the depths of hell which can do nothing but continue to sink below the sea, towards hell, a crumbling legacy that is quickly disintegrating into the sands of time, and there is nothing anyone can do about it. The residents continue to live and go about their days, knowing on some level that they are sinking, but everyone ignores what is right in front of them, and so they are all swallowed up by the flames of hell. The fall of the House of Usher serves as a warning to those who put money over morals, power over humility, and legacy over love. It underscores the inevitable decay and downfall of those who prioritize material and superficial gains over genuine human connections and ethical values. Poe and Flanagan masterfully intertwine the physical deterioration of the Usher mansion with the mental deterioration of its inhabitants, symbolizing the destructive consequences of misplaced priorities. Just as the Usher family's lineage is tainted by their obsessions, the mansion crumbles under the weight of its own decadence. The story reminds us that the pursuit of wealth and status, when devoid of a moral compass, can lead to personal and familial ruin. It emphasizes the importance of maintaining a balance between ambition and integrity, and suggests that without a foundation of genuine love and moral values, even the mightiest of dynasties can fall. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I had a lot of fun making this one, and I'd love to hear what you think about the series, so let me know in the comments. I'd also really appreciate it if you did like this video to give it a like and maybe even subscribe to help the channel grow. If you would like to financially help the channel out, then please have a look at my children's book series, Spiral Fairy Tales. I also have a Patreon you can consider joining too. So until next time, I wish you light, love, and harmony. Thank you for being here.